I noticed the receipt when it fluttered from Lucia's coat pocket as she hung it in the hallway. Marriott Hotel. Last Tuesday, the day of her conference. My fingers trembled slightly as I slipped it into my pocket before returning to the kitchen where steam rose from 3 perfectly plated meals. Our Thursday family dinners were sacred, a tradition I'd maintained for years despite my wife's increasingly frequent late arrivals. The front door opened again as I was garnishing the roasted salmon with fresh dill. "Something smells amazing, Dad," Molly called out, dropping her backpack by the stairs. My 17-year-old daughter bounded into the kitchen, her dark hair gathered in a messy bun, eyes bright with the intelligence that made her the top of her class. "Just in time," I said, sliding a plate toward her. "Your mother should be home soon." Molly grabbed a cherry tomato from the salad bowl. "Actually, can you help me with something first? I'm stuck on these calculations for my science project." She pulled out a notebook covered in equations. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. "Of course. What are we looking at?" As Molly explained her project, I found myself staring at the wall clock. 7:45. Lucia was now officially late, again. The hotel receipt seemed to burn a hole in my pocket. "Dad? Are you listening?" Molly's voice pulled me back. "Sorry, sweetheart. Let me see that equation again." I focused on the numbers, on the simple logic of mathematics where things either balanced or they didn't. Unlike marriage. The front door opened at 8:15. Molly and I were already eating. "I'm so sorry." Lucia swept in, bringing with her a cloud of unfamiliar perfume, something expensive and floral that I hadn't bought her. The partners' meeting ran long and then traffic was terrible. She kissed the top of Molly's head before leaning down to brush her lips against my cheek. I inhaled deeply, confirming what I already knew: this wasn't her usual scent. Her navy blue dress was also new, something designer with a price tag that would make our financial advisor wince. "We saved you a plate," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I slid her dinner into the microwave. Lucia set her phone face down on the counter. "You're a saint, Elliot. How was everyone's day?" I watched as Molly launched into a detailed explanation of her science project, noticing how my daughter's eyes occasionally flickered between Lucia and me, sensing the tension that hung in the air like static before a storm. "That sounds fascinating, honey," Lucia said, though I could tell she was only half listening. Her phone vibrated against the counter, and she flipped it over to check the screen. Whatever she saw made her lips curve into a small, secretive smile. "Something important?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Just work," she replied too quickly, turning the phone face down again. "Quinn needs some files for tomorrow's meeting." Quinn Bradford. The senior partner who had taken a special interest in mentoring my wife over the past year. The same Quinn Bradford who was known for his expensive tastes and serial affairs. I took a sip of water, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth along with it. Strange that he needs files during dinner time. "The Anderson case is going to trial next week," she explained smoothly. "Everyone's working overtime." The microwave beeped. I retrieved her plate and set it before her, watching as she picked at the salmon I'd spent an hour preparing. In the 15 years of our marriage, I'd become an excellent cook, one of many ways I'd tried to be the husband she deserved. The doorbell rang, startling all of us. "I'll get it," I said, pushing away from the table. Jennifer Parker, Lucia's best friend since law school, stood on our doorstep looking oddly flustered when she saw me. "Elliot," I thought, "isn't Lucia at her?" She stopped herself. "I mean, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd drop by." I stepped aside to let her in. Perfect timing. "We're having dinner." Lucia just got home from her partners' meeting. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly. "Right, of course. The partners' meeting." As I led her into the dining room, I caught the panicked look that passed between my wife and her friend. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "Jennifer." "What a surprise," Lucia said, her voice an octave higher than normal. I returned to my seat, cutting into my salmon with precise movements. "Yes, what a surprise indeed." Molly glanced between all 3 adults, her teenager's intuition picking up on the undercurrents. I smiled at our guest, even as I felt something inside me harden like concrete. "Jennifer, would you like some wine?" I was just about to open another bottle. I already knew what I would find when I started looking. But for now, I would pour the wine, maintain the conversation, and pretend that our fragile ideal of a family wasn't already shattered beyond repair. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. The administrative assistant at my investment firm sounded genuinely concerned. I'd built a reputation for reliability that made my absence noteworthy. But some things are more important than quarterly projections and client meetings. I parked my Audi 2 blocks from Lucia's law firm, choosing a spot with a clear view of the building's glass entrance. The coffee in my travel mug had gone cold hours ago, but I barely noticed as I sipped it, eyes fixed on the revolving doors. At 11:30, she emerged in a crimson pantsuit I'd bought her last Christmas. My stomach tightened as Quinn Bradford appeared beside her, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, a casual gesture that spoke volumes. I slid down in my seat as they walked past, Lucia laughing at something he said, her head tilted toward him with an intimacy that made my chest ache. I followed their Uber at a safe distance. Downtown traffic provided perfect cover as they headed toward the upscale district where expense account lunches fueled business deals and apparently affairs. They entered Le Bistro, a French restaurant where I'd once taken Lucia for our 10th anniversary. I waited 15 minutes before following, requesting a corner table with a partial view of where they sat. The waiter handed me a menu I didn't open. "Just coffee, please," I said, my eyes fixed on the way Quinn's fingers intertwined with my wife's across the white tablecloth. I brought my DSLR camera, the one I used for Molly's soccer games and dance recitals. Now I adjusted the telephoto lens under the table, capturing evidence with each quiet click of the shutter. Lucia feeding Quinn a bite of dessert. His hand on her thigh. The kiss that confirmed everything the hotel receipt had suggested. When they finally left, I paid for my untouched coffee and followed at a distance. They walked 3 blocks to the Marriott, the same hotel from the receipt, speaking closely, stopping once so Quinn could tuck a strand of hair behind Lucia's ear. I took more photos until they disappeared through the revolving doors. I drove home in a strange, calm state. The pain was there, a dull throb beneath my ribs, but overlaid with something cooler and more calculating. My hands didn't shake as I transferred the photos to my laptop and created an encrypted folder labeled Insurance. Molly came home at 3:30 earlier than usual. She froze when she saw me at the kitchen table. "Dad, what are you doing home?" "Took the day off," I said casually. "Thinking about making lasagna for dinner? Your mother texted she'll be working late again." Molly's eyes darted away. "Actually, I'm staying at Brenda's tonight. Study group for AP chemistry." I noticed the duffel bag slung over her shoulder. "Need me to drive you?" "No," she answered too quickly. "I mean, her mom is picking me up in a few minutes." I nodded slowly. "What's in the bag?" "Seems heavy for just books." "Just clothes and stuff. You know how girls are." She laughed nervously. "Actually, I need to grab something from my room." As soon as she disappeared upstairs, I made a decision. When her phone buzzed with a text a few minutes later, Molly rushed down with the bag. "That's Brenda's mom. Gotta go." She kissed my cheek hurriedly. "Don't wait up." Through the window, I watched her get into an Uber, not a mother's SUV. 20 minutes later, I was following another car, this time my daughter's. The Uber stopped 6 blocks from the Marriott. Molly got out, adjusted the duffel bag and walked the rest of the way. I parked and followed at a distance, watching as she entered the hotel lobby, approached the front desk and left the bag with the concierge. They exchanged words I couldn't hear, but the practiced ease of the transaction suggested this wasn't the first time. My daughter was delivering clothes to my wife at the hotel where she was meeting her lover. Back home, a new kind of anger simmered inside me, not the explosive rage I might have expected but something colder and more focused. I went to Molly's room and found her old phone in her desk drawer. She'd gotten a new one for her birthday but kept this as a backup. I knew her password, her birth year and the jersey number of her favorite soccer player. The backup was still synced to our family cloud. I scrolled through months of messages, finding a thread with Lucia from 3 months ago. "Mom, can you bring the blue dress to the hotel? Quinn likes it." "Molly, I have debate club until 4. Can't it wait?" "Mom, please sweetie. I'll make it up to you." "Molly, fine. Same place as last time?" "Mom, you're my lifesaver red heart." Dozens more exchanges followed. Excuses for missing dinner. Coordinating stories. My daughter had become my wife's accomplice, delivering clothes and alibis with equal efficiency. When Lucia came home at 9, I was waiting in the kitchen with a glass of wine and leftovers I'd reheated for her. "You didn't have to wait up," she said, kissing my cheek. Her lips still carried the faint taste of expensive whiskey, Quinn's preferred drink. "How was the client dinner?" I asked. She launched into a detailed story about difficult negotiations and breakthrough compromises, a performance worthy of her courtroom reputation. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, playing my role in this charade one last time. "By the way," I said as she finished her wine, "Jennifer called. She seemed confused about your schedule this week." A flicker of panic crossed Lucia's face before she recovered. Oh, she's just mixed up. We had to reschedule our lunch plans. Another lie to add to the collection. I smiled and took her empty plate. Of course. That must be it. I had all the evidence I needed now. The question was what to do with it. Saturday evening, I stood in our kitchen slicing fresh herbs with methodical precision. The aroma of roasting duck filled the house, Lucia's favorite meal that I prepared only for special occasions. Beside it, a bottle of Chateau Margaux breathed, the same vintage we'd drunk on our honeymoon. Something smells amazing, Lucia said, entering the kitchen in a silk blouse and designer jeans. She wrapped her arms around my waist from behind, resting her cheek against my shoulder. What's the occasion? I turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral. I thought we could use a nice family dinner. Just the three of us. Relief washed over her features. I recognized it immediately. She thought this elaborate meal meant forgiveness, reconciliation. She believed I was ready to overlook her indiscretions for the sake of our family. That sounds perfect, she said, squeezing my hand. I'll set the table. I watched her select our best china and crystal glasses, humming softly as she arranged everything with care. Hope made her movements light, almost girlish. It reminded me of the woman I'd fallen in love with before ambition and dissatisfaction had twisted her into someone I barely recognized. Molly came downstairs in jeans and a university sweatshirt. Stanford, her dream school. Her expression was guarded as she took in the elaborate dinner preparations. Dad, what's all this? She asked cautiously. Just felt like cooking, I replied, sliding the duck from the oven. Would you open the wine, please? We sat around the dining table, illuminated by candles I'd carefully arranged. For several minutes, we ate in appreciative silence, complimenting the food and making inconsequential small talk about neighborhood gossip. The perfect picture of domestic harmony, except for the knowledge that poisoned each bite I took. As I served the chocolate souffle, I finally broke the facade. I found some interesting messages on your old phone, Molly, I said conversationally as if discussing the weather. The backup synced to our family cloud. The spoon in Molly's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Lucia's face drained of color. Elliot, what are you talking about? Lucia attempted to sound confused, but her voice trembled slightly. I took my time, savoring a spoonful of souffle before continuing. Messages between Molly and Quinn. Did you know they were in contact, Lucia? Our daughter's eyes widened in panic, darting between us. Dad, I can explain? I raised my hand gently. It's interesting, actually. Quinn promised to help you get into Stanford's pre-law program. Connections with the admissions committee, he said. Lucia set down her glass with a sharp click against the table. Elliot, this isn't how I wanted you to find out. Find out what? I asked mildly. That my wife has been sleeping with her boss for almost a year? Or that my daughter has been helping cover it up for 3 months? Molly's eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to lie to you, Dad. But Mom said it would hurt you too much if you knew. And Quinn promised he could get me into Stanford. Because apparently my decades of financial planning for your education wasn't enough, I said, my voice still calm despite the acid burning in my throat. Tell me, was the betrayal worth a college acceptance letter you haven't even received yet? Elliot, please, Lucia leaned forward. What Quinn and I have, it's real. I wasn't looking for this to happen, but I found something with him that I've been missing. A connection, a chance to rediscover myself. I laughed softly. And what exactly have you been missing, Lucia? The 15 years I've supported your career? The house I've maintained while you worked late? The meals I've cooked? The daughter I've raised? That's not fair, she said, her voice hardening. I've contributed to this family too. By sleeping with Quinn Bradford? Or by teaching our daughter that loyalty means nothing when something shinier comes along? Lucia's jaw tightened. We could work through this. Many couples do. Maybe an open marriage. An open marriage, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the words. So you can have your cake and eat it too? Keep the stability I provide while you pursue your real connection with Quinn? Mom, you said you were going to leave Dad for Quinn, Molly interjected, looking confused. I turned to my daughter with raised eyebrows. Is that so? Lucia shot Molly a warning glance. I was exploring options. Nothing was decided. Nothing was decided, I echoed. Tell me, when exactly did this affair start? 3 months ago, when Molly became involved. Lucia stared into her wine glass. About a year, she admitted quietly. But it became serious only recently. Another lie. The evidence I'd gathered showed at least 11 months of hotel receipts, mysterious weekend conferences, and unexplained expenses. I see, I said calmly, refilling everyone's wine glass. And what was your endgame here, Lucia? String me along until Quinn made partner and could afford the lifestyle you've grown accustomed to? It wasn't like that, she insisted, though her eyes avoided mine. I was confused. I still care about you, Elliot. Just not enough to be faithful, I noted. Molly wiped her tears with her napkin. Dad, I'm so sorry. I thought I was helping Mom be happy, and Quinn said his recommendation would be guaranteed. It's not your fault, I told her gently. Your mother put you in an impossible position. I stood up and raised my wine glass. I think I understand now. Both of you made choices you felt were necessary. And now I need to make mine. Lucia looked up hopefully. You'll forgive me? I smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Let's toast to new beginnings, shall we? The relief on Lucia's face was palpable as she raised her glass, thinking she'd managed to salvage something from the wreckage of her betrayal. If only she knew what kind of new beginning I had in mind. Monday morning, I sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office, across from a man who looked nothing like what I'd expected. Martin Hayes, private investigator, wore a tailored suit and had the polished appearance of the financial executives I dealt with daily. No trench coat, no world-weary demeanor, just sharp eyes that missed nothing. Everything's in the file, he said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Financial transactions going back 18 months, communication records, surveillance photos. It's all there. I paid him in cash, a substantial amount that would never appear on any of my credit card statements or bank withdrawals. The envelope went into my briefcase without my opening it. There's something else you should know, Hayes added, stirring his espresso. Bradford has a pattern. You're not the first husband to hire me because of him. My hand paused on my coffee cup. Go on. He targets married women in the firm, usually those on track for partnership. After the affairs end, the women typically leave the company, voluntarily or otherwise. Hayes's expression remained professional, but I caught a flicker of disgust. 3 in the past 5 years. I nodded slowly. And their husbands? Most just wanted the evidence for divorce proceedings. One tried to confront Bradford directly. They shrugged. That didn't end well for anyone. I'm not most husbands, I said quietly. Back in my office, I locked the door and opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, financial records, and a detailed report that confirmed everything I'd suspected and revealed things I hadn't. Quinn Bradford wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was involved in creative accounting practices that skirted regulatory boundaries. And Lucia, with her expertise in securities law, had been helping him. That evening, while Lucia worked late, genuinely at the office this time, according to Hayes' surveillance team, I searched her home office. Behind a row of law books, I found a USB drive containing documents she'd never mentioned. Client information, internal memos about regulatory reviews, and draft responses to SEC inquiries that showed clear knowledge of questionable practices. In my own office, I methodically created a plan. Spreadsheets tracking our joint finances. Lists of assets. Contact information for competitors of Quinn's law firm who might be interested in what I now knew. I worked with the cold, precise focus that had made me successful in investment management, treating my marriage like a failing company that needed to be dismantled for maximum value. What are you doing? I looked up to see Molly standing in the doorway, her face pale in the glow of my computer screen. It was after midnight and I hadn't heard her come in. Just catching up on some work, I said, closing the laptop. Shouldn't you be in bed? You have school tomorrow. She hesitated. I heard you moving around. Dad, about Saturday night. We don't need to discuss it now, I interrupted gently. It's late. Are you and Mom getting divorced? Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I considered my next words carefully. I haven't decided anything yet. These things take time. She really loves you, you know. She's just confused. Molly sounded like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Love shouldn't confuse you into lying to the people who care about you, I said, more sharply than intended. Seeing her flinch, I softened my tone. Go to bed, sweetheart. Things will look different in the morning. After she left, I reopened the laptop and made a series of calls to Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore. By dawn, I had created 3 new offshore accounts under a corporate entity that couldn't be easily traced back to me. Next, I accessed our joint investment accounts and began the process of transferring funds. Not everything, not yet, but enough to ensure I wouldn't be left vulnerable. At 9 the next morning, I met with Roland Parker, a senior partner at Blackwell & Schmidt, the main competitor to my wife's firm. We'd attended the same university, though he'd been several years ahead of me. "This is quite an interesting situation you've brought me, Elliot," Parker said, examining the documents I'd provided, copies only with certain details redacted. "If what you're suggesting is accurate, there could be serious repercussions." "I understand discretion is paramount," I replied. "I'm not looking to create a scandal, just to protect my interests." Parker leaned back in his leather chair. "And your wife's involvement?" "Limited but not insignificant," I answered truthfully. "She had knowledge at minimum." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'll need to consult with some colleagues. But I believe we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement here." That evening, I installed small, nearly invisible cameras in the living room and kitchen, places where Lucia and I might have conversations about our future. Not technically legal, perhaps, but necessary. I needed leverage, and nothing provided better leverage than a person's own words. I was finishing the installation when I heard Molly on the phone upstairs, her voice carrying through the heating vent. "Mom, I think Dad's planning something. I saw him on his computer last night with all these financial documents open." Pause. "No, he didn't say anything specific. Just that he hasn't decided anything yet." Another pause. "Are you sure?" He seemed really calm. Like scary calm. I silently closed my office door, missing Lucia's response. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." I smiled grimly at the casual "love you," a habit she couldn't seem to break even while betraying me. I texted back a simple "okay," and returned to my preparations. Let her think I was the predictable, passive husband she'd always taken for granted. Let her believe my calm meant weakness, my silence meant acceptance. The storm I was preparing would leave no doubt about who I really was. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Lucia prepare for her business dinner. She sat at her vanity, applying lipstick in a precise crimson line that matched her dress, a new one I hadn't seen before. Around her neck gleamed the pearl necklace I had given her for our 15th anniversary, the irony of which wasn't lost on me. "You look nice," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Important client?" She met my eyes in the mirror, her expression carefully composed. "Senior partners dinner. Quarterly planning session." The lie came smoothly practiced. "Don't wait up, these things always run late." "Of course," I replied. "Good luck with the planning." Her hands paused on her earrings, small diamond studs, another gift from me. "You've been very understanding lately, Elliot." "I appreciate it." I smiled. "I've had time to think about what matters. Family. Future. The things we build together." Relief softened her features. She believed I had resigned myself to our new arrangement, the dutiful husband at home while she pursued her real connection with Quinn. My apparent acceptance had made her careless. "Molly," she called out, "can you come help me with this clasp?" Our daughter appeared in the doorway, her expression guarded as she glanced between us. She'd been walking on eggshells since our dinner confrontation, uncertain of where anyone stood. "Sure, Mom," she said, crossing to the vanity. I watched them together, noting their easy physical familiarity, how Lucia tilted her head as Molly fixed the bracelet clasp, the way they shared a conspiratorial smile in the mirror. They were a team now, united in their secret against me. "Perfect," Lucia said, standing up. "How do I look?" "Beautiful," Molly answered. "Quinn will love that dress." I kept my face neutral as my wife shot our daughter a warning glance. "I mean the senior partners will be impressed," Molly corrected awkwardly. "I'm sure they will," I said mildly. "Have a good evening, Lucia." As soon as the front door closed, Molly turned to me. "Dad, I didn't mean." "It's all right," I interrupted. "I'm not blind, Molly. I know where she's going." She bit her lip. "Are you guys getting divorced?" "I honestly don't know yet," I lied. "These things are complicated." "Quinn says he really loves her," Molly ventured. "He talks about taking us to his place in the Hamptons this summer." "Us?" I raised an eyebrow. "Mom and me," she clarified, looking away. "He says I could invite friends from school. His house has a private beach." "That sounds nice," I said, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. "And what about me in this scenario?" Molly stared at the floor. "Mom says you'll be reasonable about everything. That you always are." I nodded slowly. "I see. And what do you want, Molly?" "I want everyone to be happy," she answered, the standard teenage response to impossible situations. "Sometimes that's not possible," I told her gently. "Sometimes we have to choose what kind of unhappiness we can live with." I went to my office after Molly retreated to her room, tracking Lucia's phone location as she traveled to the lawn, The upscale restaurant where I had proposed to her 18 years ago. Quinn's sense of irony, or perhaps just his arrogance, was remarkable. My phone rang at 9:15. It's happening, he said without preamble. Bradford just ended things. She's not taking it well. I closed my eyes briefly. You're certain? My source at the restaurant confirms. Bradford said it wasn't working anymore. Mentioned something about financial concerns and unnecessary complications. Precisely as planned. 2 days earlier, I had met with Quinn privately, showing him copies of the financial documents I'd discovered and explaining exactly what they meant for his career if they reached the SEC. I hadn't threatened him directly, I didn't need to. Quinn Bradford was nothing if not pragmatic about self-preservation. Is she still there? I asked. Left about 5 minutes ago. Looked pretty shaken up. Thank you. I ended the call and waited. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with Lucia's name. I let it ring through to voicemail. She called 3 more times before sending a text. Please pick up. We need to talk. Something happened. I didn't respond. Instead, I tracked her movement from the restaurant to our favorite wine bar, then to Jennifer's apartment and finally toward home. Each destination represented a failed attempt to find comfort or assistance. When the front door finally opened at 11:30, I was sitting in the darkened living room, a single lamp casting just enough light to read by. Lucia's eyes were swollen, her makeup smeared despite obvious attempts to repair it. The pearl necklace was gone. Elliot, she said, startled to find me waiting. I thought you'd be in bed. How was the partners' dinner? I asked, setting my book aside. She hesitated only briefly before collapsing onto the sofa. It was awful. Quinn, he ended things between us. Said it was too complicated, that he couldn't afford the distraction right now. Her voice broke on the last words. That must have been painful, I said, my tone carefully neutral. Especially after all the promises he made. About your future together. About helping Molly with Stanford. Lucia looked up sharply. How did you know the details? I finished for her. I know everything, Lucia. Including what Quinn really wanted from our family. What are you talking about? I smiled thinly. He wasn't interested in you for your legal brilliance or your charm. He wanted access to my client list at Meridian Investments. The high-net-worth individuals who trust me with their portfolios. Her face paled. That's not true. He loves me. He's just scared of the complications. Check your credit cards, I suggested. Try to buy something tomorrow. What have you done? She whispered. Nothing yet, I answered truthfully. But the night is still young. I led Lucia to my office, where the soft glow of my computer monitor cast shadows across the room. Her eyes were still red-rimmed from crying, her expensive dress wrinkled from the night's emotional collapse. She looked broken, the polished attorney facade cracked to reveal the panicked woman beneath. Sit down, I said, my voice gentle but firm. She sank into the leather chair across from my desk, watching warily as I opened my laptop and turned it to face her. On the screen was a video player showing 4 different camera feeds from around our house. Living room, kitchen, foyer, and hallway. What is this? She whispered. I pressed play on a recording from 3 days earlier. The screen showed Lucia and Molly in the kitchen, their voices clear through the high-quality microphones I'd installed. Dad's been so quiet lately, Molly was saying. Do you think he suspects anything? Elliot is predictable, Lucia replied, stirring her coffee. He avoids confrontation. Even if he has suspicions, he'll never act on them. But what if he finds out everything? Molly asked. Lucia laughed on the recording. Then he'll do what he always does, try to fix things, compromise, find a middle ground. That's who he is. It's why I married him. Stability has its uses. I stopped the playback. Lucia's face had drained of color. You recorded us? She asked, her lawyer's mind no doubt racing through privacy laws. I did, I answered simply. And I found some interesting insights into how you see me. Predictable. Avoidant. Useful for stability. Elliot, I was upset. Those were private conversations in our home. I nodded. Yes, they were. Just like your conversations with Quinn about my client list were private. Just like your discussions with the managing partners about regulatory filings were private. Her eyes widened. How could you possibly know about? I know everything, Lucia, I interrupted, opening a file drawer and removing a thick folder. Every meeting. Every call. Every document you helped Quinn hide from regulators. I spread printouts across the desk, bank statements, emails, hotel receipts, and transcripts of conversations. The sum total of her betrayal organized with methodical precision. I've sent copies of these recordings to the board of directors at your firm, I continued calmly. Not the personal parts, I'm not cruel. Just the portions where you discuss helping Quinn conceal financial irregularities from the SEC. You did what? She stood up, swaying slightly. That's my career you're destroying. Your actions destroyed your career, I corrected. I merely provided evidence. She collapsed back into the chair. What? Why not just divorce me if you were so unhappy? Divorce is still happening, I assured her, sliding a document folder across the desk. These papers give you two options. Option 1 is a clean break. You get the minimum required by law, waive all claims to my business assets, and we never speak again except regarding Molly. And option 2, she asked, her voice barely audible. You fight me in court, I said with a slight shrug. Where I'll introduce evidence of your affair, your professional misconduct, and your manipulation of our daughter. You'll spend years in litigation, drain whatever resources you have left, and still lose. Whatever resources I have left? She repeated, the implication dawning on her. What have you done with our money? I smiled thinly. Our joint accounts are still active, though significantly reduced. My personal and business accounts are now beyond your reach. You can't do that. Half of everything is legally mine. In principle, yes, I agreed. In practice, you'll find it difficult to claim assets you can't locate or prove exist. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made us both turn. Molly stood in the doorway, her face pale as she took in the scene. I heard shouting, she said quietly. Lucia immediately reached for her. Molly, your father has lost his mind. He's threatening to destroy everything. I remained seated. I'm not threatening anything, Molly. I'm explaining consequences to your mother. Like what you did to Quinn? Molly asked. He called Mom tonight and said you blackmailed him. I presented him with evidence of his own illegal activities, I corrected. His choice was to end the affair or face an SEC investigation. He chose self-preservation, as I knew he would. Lucia stood again, gathering whatever dignity she could muster. This isn't over, Elliot. I still have friends at the firm. The board won't just take your word over mine. They already have, I replied, checking my watch. The emergency board meeting ended an hour ago. Check your email. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone. As she read, her face crumpled. Temporary suspension pending investigation, she whispered. Mom? Molly's voice was small, uncertain. It's fine, honey, Lucia said unconvincingly. Just a misunderstanding. Your father is trying to scare me. I shook my head. No more lies, Lucia. Not to Molly, not to yourself. Opening another drawer, I retrieved a final folder, the thinnest of all, and handed it to Molly. This contains the communications between Quinn and the Stanford admissions office. There are none. He has no influence there. Never did. It was another lie to secure your help in covering up the affair. Molly opened the folder, scanning the private investigator's report confirming Quinn's empty promises. He said he was friends with the dean, she said numbly. That he'd make sure my application went to the top of the pile. Quinn Bradford has never donated to Stanford, served on any university committee, or had any professional connection to their law school, I told her gently. He used you just as he used your mother. Molly's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Lucia. Is that true? Lucia's silence was answer enough. I think you should stay with your grandparents tonight, I told Molly. I've already called them. They're expecting you. And what about Mom? She asked. That depends on what she decides to do, I said, gesturing to the divorce papers still sitting on the desk. But whatever happens next is her choice, not mine. As Molly left to pack a bag, Lucia faced me, her voice low and dangerous. You won't get away with this. I'll fight you with everything I have. I leaned back in my chair, oddly calm. You're not the first of Quinn's mistresses who thought she had leverage, Lucia. The others learned otherwise. So will you. Morning light filtered through the blinds as I methodically packed my suitcase. Every fold precise, every item carefully selected. 2 suits, casual clothes, toiletries, and a small wooden box containing the few family photographs I couldn't bear to leave behind. 15 years of marriage distilled into a single carry-on bag. From downstairs came the sound of Lucia's increasingly frantic phone calls, her voice rising and falling as she cycled through friends, colleagues, and family members. Most calls went unanswered. Those that connected were brief, her pleas for help met with hesitation or outright refusal. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Molly arrived safely. She's upset but sleeping now. Call when you can. I had called my parents last night after Lucia retreated to the guest bedroom, explaining enough for them to understand why their granddaughter needed sanctuary. My mother, always intuitive, had asked few questions. "We'll take care of her," she promised. "And you when you're ready." I zipped the suitcase closed just as Lucia appeared in the doorway, her designer loungewear wrinkled from a sleepless night, eyes red-rimmed and puffy. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Away," I replied simply, lifting the suitcase from the bed. "You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. About the accounts, the house, We talked last night," I interrupted. "The papers are on my desk. My lawyer's contact information is on the first page. Everything else will proceed regardless of whether I'm here." "I've been trying to reach Quinn," she said, her voice breaking. "He won't answer. His assistant says he's unavailable indefinitely." "He's in damage control mode," I explained, checking my watch. "The board is meeting again this morning to decide whether to report certain irregularities to the SEC. Quinn is likely negotiating his own exit package. While I'm left with nothing?" she cried. "How is that fair? I was just following his lead with those documents." I regarded her calmly. "That defense rarely works in securities fraud cases. Just following orders doesn't absolve you of professional responsibility." She stepped into my path as I moved toward the door. "My parents won't even take my calls. Did you contact them too?" "No," I said truthfully. "But news travels fast. Perhaps they're simply processing their disappointment." The truth hit harder than any accusation. Lucia's shoulders slumped as she leaned against the wall. "What am I supposed to do now?" "That's not my concern anymore," I replied, stepping around her. "You made choices, Lucia. Now you'll live with them." I was halfway down the stairs when Molly burst through the front door, still wearing the clothes she'd left in last night. Seeing my suitcase, she froze. "You're leaving? For real?" Her voice cracked on the question. "Just for a while," I assured her. "I need some time to think." "But you can't go," she protested, moving to block my path just as her mother had. "This is your house too. Mom should be the one to leave." "Molly," Lucia called from the top of the stairs. "Don't speak to me that way." "Why not?" Molly shot back. "Everything that's happening is your fault. You lied to Dad, you lied to me, you helped Quinn do illegal stuff. I did it all for us." Lucia insisted, descending the stairs. "For our future. Quinn promised." "Quinn promised nothing," I interrupted firmly. "He used both of you to get what he wanted. The difference is Molly was manipulated by adults she trusted. You knew exactly what you were doing." Lucia's face hardened. "You've turned our daughter against me." "You did that yourself," I replied, setting down my suitcase. "Molly, go back to your grandparents. They're worried about you." "No," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Not until you promise you're coming back. Not until you forgive me." My heart ached at the raw pain in her voice. "There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. You were caught in the middle of an impossible situation." "I helped her lie to you," she whispered. "I delivered her clothes to the hotel. I made excuses when you asked where she was." "You're 17, I said gently. "Your mother is the adult. The responsibility was hers, not yours." From my jacket pocket, I removed a folded document and handed it to Molly. "This is proof Quinn lied about Stanford. But it doesn't matter, you never needed his help. Your grades, your extracurriculars, your essay that I helped you polish for weeks. You earned your place there on your own merit." Molly unfolded the paper. An email from Stanford's admissions office confirming her early acceptance, dated yesterday. "How did you?" "I called them 2 weeks ago," I explained. "Asked them to expedite your application review based on your academic standing. No special favors, just a request for prompt consideration of an exceptional candidate." Fresh tears filled her eyes as she looked from the letter to me. "So I got in. On my own." "You did," I confirmed. "Never doubt that you earned this." Lucia snatched the letter from Molly's hands. "This doesn't change anything. Elliot is still abandoning us, freezing our accounts, destroying everything we built." "Stop it." Molly yanked the acceptance letter back. "Just stop lying. Dad isn't destroying anything, you did that." I picked up my suitcase again. "I need to go. My flight leaves in 3 hours." "Flight?" Lucia's head snapped up. "Where are you going?" "That's not your concern anymore," I echoed her earlier words back to her. Molly threw her arms around me, sobbing against my chest. "Please don't leave me." I held her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her shampoo. I'm not leaving you. I'm just giving us all some space to figure out what comes next. Call me anytime. I'll always answer. Promise? She asked in a small voice. Promise, I affirmed, gently disentangling myself. Stay with Grandma and Grandpa for now. Focus on school, on your future. As I walked to my car, I heard Lucia behind me. Elliot, wait. What about money? The mortgage? My credit cards aren't working. I turned back one last time, seeing my wife framed in the doorway of the house we'd shared for 12 years. Once, the sight had filled me with peace and contentment. Now I felt nothing but the dull ache of finality. Check your personal email, I said. My lawyer sent over temporary support arrangements this morning. It's less than you're used to, but enough to live on while the divorce proceeds. Without waiting for her response, I got into my car and drove away, watching the house recede in my rearview mirror until it disappeared entirely. 1 week after my departure, I sat in a hotel suite in Geneva, watching the sun set over Lake Leman while my laptop screen flickered with news from home. The room service breakfast remained mostly untouched beside me, my appetite diminished by the updates from Hayes. The investigation is official now, he informed me via encrypted video call. The firm has notified the SEC about potential irregularities in several client accounts Quinn managed. And Lucia? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. Hayes' professionally neutral expression softened slightly. Terminated yesterday. The partners voted unanimously after reviewing the evidence. I nodded, feeling no satisfaction, just a hollow vindication. Has she made any moves regarding the divorce? She consulted with 3 different attorneys, Hayes replied, checking his notes. All declined to represent her once they reviewed the financial disclosures and evidence of professional misconduct. She's now working with a 4th, Samantha Reeves. Less prestigious firm, but known for aggressive tactics. The name was familiar. Reeves represented one of Quinn's previous entanglements. Hayes raised an eyebrow. Interesting connection. I'll look into it. After ending the call, I stepped onto the balcony, letting the crisp alpine air clear my head. My phone vibrated with a text from Molly. Dad, when are you coming home? Things are getting weird here. I called her immediately. Hey, sweetheart. What's happening? Her voice was hushed as if she didn't want to be overheard. Mom's freaking out. She got fired, and now she's saying terrible things about you to anyone who'll listen. Reporters called the house yesterday. Reporters? I straightened, gripping the balcony railing. Something about allegations of financial misconduct at Mom's firm, Molly explained. She told them you were behind it all, that you fabricated evidence to frame Quinn because you were jealous. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm sorry you're dealing with this. Where are you now? Still at Grandma and Grandpa's. Mom keeps calling, demanding I come home, but... Her voice trailed off. But what, Molly? She scares me sometimes, she admitted quietly. She's not the mom I remember. It's like she's someone else now. My chest tightened. Has she threatened you? No, nothing like that. She's just desperate. Keeps saying I need to tell her side to people, to the lawyers. Molly paused. I don't want to take sides anymore, Dad. You don't have to, I assured her. Focus on school. On Stanford. On your future. After we hung up, I made another call, to my attorney in New York. Move forward with the house, I instructed. And increase Molly's trust fund distribution schedule as we discussed. The next morning, Hayes called with more updates. Quinn Bradford held a press conference. He began without preamble. Denied any romantic involvement with your wife, characterized her as an overzealous colleague who misinterpreted professional mentorship. My laugh held no humor. Predictable. And her response. That's the interesting part, Hayes said. She went to his home last night, created quite a scene. Security footage shows her being escorted from the building. She was shouting about promises he'd made, about sacrifices for their relationship. Were there witnesses? Several. Including a neighbor who recorded portions on their phone. It's already circulating among the firm's employees. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. Part of me, a small vindictive part one wasn't proud of, felt satisfaction at Lucia's public humiliation. The larger part felt only sadness at how predictably this was all unfolding. 2 days later, I received an urgent email from my real estate attorney. The sale of our house, facilitated by the power of attorney Lucia had given me years ago for investment purposes, was complete. The new owners required vacant possession within 30 days. I forwarded the eviction notice to Lucia with a brief note. A studio apartment has been arranged for you near your parents. Details attached. All your personal belongings will be placed in storage. Her reply came within minutes. You bastard. You can't do this. That house is half mine. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Jennifer, Lucia's oldest friend. We'd never been close, and her loyalty had clearly belonged to my wife throughout the affair. Elliot, she began, her voice strained. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. What do you need, Jennifer? I asked wearily. It's about Lucia, she said. She's not well. She showed up at my apartment last night with a bottle of vodka, raving about how you've been planning this for months, how you knew about the affair long before you confronted her. I remained silent. Was she right? Jennifer pressed. Did you know all along? Does it matter now? I countered. She sighed heavily. I guess not. But Elliot, she's lost everything. Her job, her home, her reputation. Quinn has completely cut her off and is letting her take all the blame for the financial irregularities. He's claiming she acted alone. And you're surprised by this? I asked. Quinn Bradford has a history of discarding women who become liabilities. She thought she was different, Jennifer said quietly. We all did. A familiar bitterness rose in my throat. Every mistress thinks she's different, Jennifer. Everyone believes the lies because they want to believe. Lucia is an attorney, she should have known better than most. She's talking about contesting the divorce, fighting for half of everything, Jennifer warned. She says she has evidence you were planning this for months, that it constitutes premeditated financial fraud. I almost laughed. Let her try. Everything I did was legal, if not particularly charitable. The courts will see that. After hanging up, I stood at the window of my hotel suite, staring at the glittering lights reflected in Lake Lehman. Somewhere across the ocean, the life I'd built for 15 years was crumbling into dust. The wife who had betrayed me was facing the consequences of her choices. The daughter caught between us was suffering collateral damage I couldn't fully prevent. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt only emptiness, the hollow victory of winning a game that had already cost too much to play. 3 months after my abrupt departure, I returned to the city. The autumn air carried a crispness that matched my mood, clear, sharp, and tinged with melancholy. I'd spent my exile building a European branch of my investment firm, throwing myself into work with the same methodical focus I'd once devoted to my marriage. My return wasn't by choice. The SEC investigation into Quinn Bradford's financial dealings had reached a critical phase, and my testimony was required. I checked into a downtown hotel under an assumed name, instructions from my attorney to maintain a low profile until the hearing. On my second morning back, I ventured to a small coffee shop several blocks from the hotel. It was early, the place nearly empty as I ordered a simple black coffee and took a corner table with my back to the wall, a habit I'd developed during my time away. I didn't immediately notice her when she entered. My attention was on the financial reports on my tablet, numbers that had become my primary relationship in recent months. It was only when I heard her voice ordering a triple-shot vanilla latte extra hot that I looked up. Lucia stood at the counter, her back to me. Even from behind, I could see how much she had changed. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a worn sweater. Her once perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, streaks of premature gray visible at the temples. She was thinner, almost gaunt. I could have slipped out unnoticed. Should have, probably. Instead, I remained frozen in place as she turned with her coffee and saw me. Recognition dawned slowly, her eyes widening as if seeing a ghost. In some ways I supposed I was Elliot. Her voice barely carried across the quiet cafe. I looked at her without speaking, taking in the full impact of the changes 3 months had wrought. Deep lines bracketed her mouth. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. The confident attorney who had once commanded courtrooms was gone, replaced by a woman who seemed to have aged a decade in a season. She approached my table with hesitant steps. You're back. Temporarily, I replied, my voice neutral. SEC testimony. Lucia nodded slowly. Against Quinn. Against everyone involved in the financial misconduct, I corrected. She swallowed hard. Including me? If necessary. The simple admission hung between us. She clutched her coffee cup like a lifeline. Can I sit? She asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. I should have said no. Should have walked away as she had walked away from our vows. Instead, I nodded once, closing my tablet. She slid into the seat, her movements tentative. Up close, the changes were even more stark. Fine lines around her eyes that makeup no longer concealed. Chipped nail polish on fingers that trembled slightly. "I'm working at Donovan's now," she said, naming a mid-tier restaurant downtown. "Waitressing." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "The legal community is close to me," she continued, her voice tight. "Quinn made sure of that. Once he cut a deal with prosecutors, he gave them everything. Emails, memos, all with my name prominently featured." "And your testimony?" I asked. A bitter smile crossed her face. "Irrelevant. His word against mine, and he has the firm backing him. I'm just the disgraced associate who betrayed her husband and her professional ethics in one spectacular flameout. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt a dull ache where triumph should have been." "How's Molly?" she asked, her voice softening. "Thriving," I answered truthfully. "Her first semester at Stanford starts next month. She's already connected with some pre-law student groups." Pain flashed across Lucia's features. "She still won't see me. Won't answer my calls." "She needs time," I said, though I wasn't sure if time would be enough to heal that particular wound. "And you?" she asked, studying my face. "You look different." I knew what she meant. The weight loss, the shorter haircut, the newfound physical fitness from hours in hotel gyms. My exterior had changed to match the transformation within. "I am different," I confirmed. "Elliot." She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. "I know what I did was unforgivable. But is there any chance, any possibility, that someday we could—" "No," I interrupted gently but firmly. "That door is closed, Lucia." She withdrew her hand, blinking rapidly. "I still love you. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. What I had with Quinn, it wasn't real. It was fantasy, delusion." "I believe you think that now," I said carefully. "But love doesn't betray. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't involve our child in deception." Before she could respond, the coffee shop door opened and Molly walked in. She froze when she saw us together, shock and confusion crossing her face before hardening into something colder. "Molly." Lucia stood quickly, knocking her coffee onto the floor. "Sweetheart, I've been trying to reach you for weeks." Our daughter looked past her mother to me. "Dad? What's going on?" "Accidental meeting," I explained, rising from my chair. "I didn't know you'd be here." "I texted you I was coming to meet you," Molly said, confusion evident. I checked my phone, finding her message that had arrived during my conversation with Lucia. "I'm sorry. I didn't see it." Molly's gaze shifted between us, settling on her mother with unmistakable hurt. "I should go." "Please, just 5 minutes," Lucia begged, reaching for her. "I have some things from Grandma's house for you. Photos, your childhood things." "I don't want anything," Molly said coldly. "Dad helped me get everything important weeks ago." Lucia's face crumpled. "He did?" "Through his assistant," Molly clarified, looking uncomfortable. "He's been helping me with everything for Stanford. Housing, financial aid, everything." I saw the exact moment when Lucia realized how completely she'd been replaced, not just as a wife but as a parent. The knowledge seemed to physically diminish her, her shoulders sagging under its weight. "I should let you two talk," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "It was good to see you both." As she walked away, Molly turned to me with troubled eyes. "Dad? Are you okay?" I watched Lucia's retreating form through the window, disappearing into the morning crowd. "I'm fine," I said, though the hollow feeling in my chest suggested otherwise. "Let's get breakfast somewhere else." 1 year after my discovery of Lucia's betrayal, I stood at the window of my London office, watching rain trace patterns on the glass. The Thames flowed gray and steady below, mirroring the overcast sky. My new reality, a life rebuilt from the rubble of betrayal. My phone vibrated with a text from my attorney. Sentence delivered. 3 years probation, 200 hours community service, restitution payments, and a lifetime bar from securities practice. Prosecution considered her cooperation against Bradford as mitigating factor. I set the phone down without replying. The legal outcome felt strangely anticlimactic. The real punishment, Lucia's loss of profession, reputation, and family, had already been enacted months ago, more thoroughly than any court could manage. Quinn Bradford had fared worse, receiving a suspended sentence and substantial fines that decimated the fortune he'd so carefully accumulated. His name had become synonymous with ethical breaches in legal circles, a cautionary tale for ambitious attorneys willing to cut corners. I turned from the window as my assistant knocked lightly on the door. "Mr. Miles, your 4 o'clock is here." "Thank you, Sarah. Give me a moment." Alone again, I opened my desk drawer and removed a sealed envelope that had arrived that morning. Inside was the final divorce decree, officially ending my marriage to Lucia. Accompanying it was a smaller envelope in my attorney's handwriting. She asked me to deliver this with the papers. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a simple white card with Lucia's handwriting, once confident and bold, now smaller and less certain. Elliot, you won. Completely and utterly. Everything you planned worked perfectly. I'm left with nothing while you build your new empire across the ocean. I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I will only say that I understand now what I threw away, not just a comfortable life but a good man who loved me despite my flaws. You chose this path of reckoning and I can't blame you for it. As you once told me, I chose my path first. Oh. Along with the note were several photographs from our life together. Our wedding day, Molly's birth, family vacations when happiness had been genuine. I returned them to the envelope and placed it in the drawer, closing it firmly. My phone rang, Molly's ringtone. Hey Dad. Her voice carried the distinctive background noise of a college dormitory. Did you get my midterm grades? Straight A's, I confirmed, pride warming my voice. I expected nothing less. How's the pre-law society? Amazing. Professor Winters is mentoring me for the moot court competition next semester. Her enthusiasm was palpable even across the Atlantic. When are you visiting again? The guest lectures you're scheduled for aren't until next month. I might come earlier, I said. There are some business meetings I could arrange. Maybe we could take that drive up the coast we talked about. I'd love that. She paused. Have you heard about Mom? My grip tightened on the phone. The sentencing was today. No, I mean about her job. She's working at a paralegal training program now. Teaching ethics, ironically enough. I hadn't known. My surveillance of Lucia's life had ended months ago, when it became clear the legal system would deliver its own form of justice. That's good, I said carefully. It sounds like a fresh start. She sent me a graduation invitation, Molly continued, for when I finish undergrad. Said she doesn't expect to attend, but wanted me to know she's proud of me. I remained silent, unsure how to respond. I haven't decided if I'll respond, Molly admitted. Sometimes I miss her, but then I remember everything and get angry all over again. You don't have to decide anything now, I assured her. You have time. After we hung up, I turned back to the window, watching London carry on its busy existence below. In my reflection on the glass, I barely recognized myself. The transformation went beyond the physical changes. The leaner build, the shorter hair, the more tailored suits. The man staring back at me had a hardness around the eyes that hadn't existed before, a watchfulness that came from knowing trust could be shattered in an instant. My assistant knocked again. Mr. Miles? Ms. Reynolds is still waiting. Send her in, I said, straightening my tie. Claire Reynolds entered with a confident smile. My new business partner in the European expansion, brilliant and driven. We'd been seeing each other casually for 2 months, taking things slowly by mutual agreement. Ready to review the Frankfurt proposals? She asked, setting her portfolio on the conference table. Actually, I said, making a sudden decision, how about we discuss it over dinner instead? There's a new place on the river I've been meaning to try. Her smile widened. I'd like that. As we left the office together, my phone buzzed with an email notification. A message from my attorney with attachments, financial statements showing the final disbursement of assets from the divorce. The last thread connecting me to my old life severed. I silenced the phone without opening the email. Those details could wait. For now, I wanted to focus on the future unfolding before me, not perfect, not unmarked by the scars of the past, but mine to shape anew. Later that evening, as Claire and I shared a bottle of wine overlooking the Thames, she asked the question I'd been avoiding for weeks. Are you finally ready to talk about what brought you to London? The real story? I met her gaze steadily. It's not a happy one. Most genuine stories aren't, she replied. But they're worth hearing anyway. I took a deep breath and began to speak, not about revenge or betrayal, but about resilience and rebuilding. About how sometimes the greatest gift our enemies give us is the chance to discover who we truly are when everything familiar is stripped away. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the city washed clean and glistening under newfound stars. A new reality, imperfect but filled with possibility.